So there we go. So we're going to talk about how to create an instructor account and set up your class for the use of iClicker Cloud. So if you'd like to share your screen, we'll go through this step by step and talk about each of the options and how they may be used. So you would do a search for iClicker, just type it right into the search bar and you should find it. Or yeah.
iClicker Cloud even?
iClicker Cloud, yep. And it will pop up. Click on that.
Okay.
And choose instructor. iClicker Cloud, because that is what we're using on campus now. We moved away from the classic version.
So formerly Reef Instructor, this one.
Yep.
Okay. Oh, I have to download it? Or create an account?
Actually, let's do create an account first, because there are some things you would want to download it if you're going to be using it from your laptop, but iClicker is installed on all the Podium computers. So if you're going to teach remotely, or if you're going to bring your laptop to class, install it on your computer. Otherwise, you don't need to. Now, there we go.
Sorry, I missed the E. All right.
And now you pick your discipline.
Okay.
And it should hide the password while you're
Should hide it, right? All right. Oh, let's see if I can get it right twice.
It will tell you if not, as all of these things do. This one, don't worry about. That's if you're using the old physical ones that matters. So you won't have a remote ID if you're doing it from the web. So, and then just agree to the privacy notice and terms. Okay, so now you've got to start. And now you could scroll through all of that. This gives you some descriptions of best practice, or you could just close it. And now this is where you do the actual setup. So you would click on create a new course. And again, you don't have to use it, but let's go through it as if you were going to use this in one of your fall courses.
Yeah.
And it's free for students if it's attendance only, but in general, we do have, the campus is paying for free student use for the full course. So in general, and the learning gains occur for the full course application. So, so select that.
So full course is what you prefer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you'd only use the attendance only if you were just using it for students to check in. But you know, if you're going to check in, you might as well check on their knowledge while they're doing it.
I like it. So the start date then should be the fall semester.
Yeah. Really.
Or should I give sort of an extra week or two?
It wouldn't hurt to.
Doesn't hurt, right?
And then set it sometime in late December. Okay. And then here, this is interesting. What's going to happen is they're going to automatically be a role light. This doesn't look familiar to me. Well, I would check probably search for and self-enroll in this course, but ultimately the roster is going to be determined from the LMS, from Brightspace.
Okay.
And here you can put in the course ID, this, you know, and the section numbers or whatever.
One of them, yeah. So but term would be fall.
Fall, yeah.
And then it does want me to do all these optional things. I'm trying to remember. I don't remember when this course meets. I think it meets, what's the course time that starts after 12:30? Must be 12:50?
12:40, I think.
Is it 12:40?
Yes,
we get out at
9, 10, 10, 20, 11:30, 12:40.
12:40. Okay, so we'll just do, oops, 12:40. Will it let me do the whole thing? Nope, it won't. But I can, oh, nope, it won't.
Yeah,
12:40. Oh my goodness.
I know, it's a little tedious.
Goodness.
But it also means they're more likely to get the right section if you have the time in.
There you go. Sure. And if I'm wrong with that, I just have to come in and reset it.
Mhm.
I assume. Okay, so we'll create.
And there's a course. And now you should be able to click on the course and adjust the settings. Yeah, now click on settings.
Settings. Mhm.
And now, first, let's go through each of those things on the tabs on the top. So you got the first one already done. So now
Okay.
click on devices. And here's a question of whether you want students to use the physical clickers or mobile devices. And for physical clickers, they'd have to buy it, and there'd also have to be a base station in your classroom. And I don't know if we're going to be putting a lot of those out. I would recommend mobile devices only.
Okay, until I
It
know
gives
it.
you more options too, because if you allowed clickers, you'd be restricted to only multiple choice questions.
Oh, okay. So it's
So,
mobile devices, there's more options.
Yeah, it gives you more options for questions. And the student focus, I haven't used, but it's in beta testing. This will tell you how often students jump out of the window. I usually leave that off, but you could turn it on if you want to surveil your students in terms of what they're doing in the mobile devices.
That doesn't sound productive, no.
And
We'll leave that off.
attendance, I don't think there's anything really important there. Well, actually, there is something there. If you want, it can highlight students who've missed certain classes or the number of classes in both your grade book and theirs. So it's just kind of a flag letting you know if students miss more than whatever number you specify.
Well, just for fun, and I can change this, right?
You can. Mhm.
Okay.
And now the auto run attendance would automatically check it during class times, but there may be times when classes are canceled or something else. You don't need to do that.
Okay.
Now, the next thing would be to require and set location. That's not working terribly well right now. That would require, if you don't turn it on, it just checks to see whether they connected, but they could be in another country while they're connected and answering questions. If you turn it on, in theory, it's supposed to measure whether or not they're connected to class. The problem is it's based on the IP address of the computer you're using, and the computer's IP address is tied to somewhere on campus, but it may not be in the building you're in. The student's IP address would depend on whether they're on Wi-Fi or whether they are connected with their data plan, and they may show up in different GPS coordinates. So I would probably I'd probably leave that off, but you could try it if you want. It would only affect the attendance here, and it wouldn't show up in any other measure or anything. It would be gradable, but it would, so it's up to you if you want to do that. But leaving the bottom one is what I just usually do. Just if they log into the class, they were there essentially.
So an iClicker base is required for remote, but I won't really have anybody using an iClicker remote.
Right.
Okay, but it doesn't matter if I leave it checked, you're saying.
So what this does is says that if they, oh yeah, that's right. So that doesn't matter. Yeah.
Okay.
So the next thing would be polling. And here's where you can set up a number of things. One is, do you want students to get a picture of whatever the question is? And the way you normally use this is iClicker will use as the question whatever is on the screen at the time when you activate the question. So if you're using slides, Google Slides, PowerPoint, or if you're using a document or Word or whatever is on the screen, it does a screen grab of it. And the question is, do you want students using their phones to see that question? And the main reason why you might not is if you don't want to allow students to participate remotely, because they'd have to be in the room to see the projected screen. So I usually just automatically send the image. So that way, for example, I had one day in class last semester where all the students were present in the classroom, where there was always at least one student on Zoom because of something. This way,
Yep.
if they're working in a browser, for example, if they're working in a tab in the browser and they have another, and they're looking at Zoom, if they're on the iClicker screen, leaving it turned on and automatically seeing it means in the tab that they're using iClicker, they will see the question without having to jump back and forth between the Zoom window and the polling window. Or if they are attending remotely on a phone, they won't have to keep switching back and forth between the Zoom screen to see the question and the mobile app in order to answer the question. This way, when the poll is active, they just go to the iClicker app and they can answer it by seeing what's on the screen as the appropriate question.
Okay, I think that sounds most convenient for them. And I think results too. Otherwise,
well,
would I be able to choose to send the results?
Here it depends on how it's used. A really common use of polling is the technique that Eric Mazur suggests, where you do it in 2 stages, where you have, if you're going to do questions that have correct answers, which isn't always the case, you know, if you're doing free-form responses, you might not do that. But if there are well-defined questions where there is a clear answer, what you will often do is do the poll and you'd see the results, but the student wouldn't. And then you ask them to work with other people, discuss it, and then vote again after they've had this period of peer instruction or peer interaction. And the problem is if you send them the results, when you end the poll, students would then see how other people voted, which would perhaps influence the discussion. Because, you know, if 60% of the people vote for one response and 40 for the other, people might automatically migrate to that response, whether it's right or wrong. And the real benefit of that stage is being able to argue for your position and listen to other people's arguments when you don't know what the consensus is. So I usually turn off that and don't send the results so students can't see the poll until I choose to share it, because you do have that option when you're running the poll. So typically I'll run the poll, I'll look at the results on my smartphone so it's not displayed on the Zoom screen, and then, or on a second screen if I'm working remotely, and then I'll have them vote again, and that's when I share the results. So as long as they're seeing the results at some point, you might not want them to see it immediately after the poll if you want them to discuss it and then vote a second time. So you can always change that, but that's generally, you know, that's what I generally recommend if you want to use that 2-stage polling.
I like that. And so when you're using this in class, you are normally running it from your phone, not from the podium.
I'm normally running it from the podium. What I used to do when I was using it before COVID, when we only had iClicker Classic, we had a base station, and the base station would show a bar chart of the results, and it would show you the % of votes for each option, but only the instructor could see that. With this, if you share the results and it's on the screen, anyone who can see the screen or the projected image would see the results. So I open the instructor app on my phone only to see the results of the poll. I'm running it right from the desktop. But that way it lets me check the results without sharing the results with the students.
Okay.
Now here, this is something you can change at any time, but this is how, if you're going to score things, and you can always use anonymous questions if you don't want to score them. Some people only score based on whether or not students are present and participating in the polls, and you have any of those options. So you can give a certain number of points just for participating, and you could require them to get the participation points by answering everything, all but one, 75%, 50%, or at least once they had to participate. Or you could do it based on whether the responses are correct or not. And, you know, some people use a mix of things. Some people use only one or only the other. I usually do it based on individual questions. So, you know, because I tend to ask questions where there are correct answers. So.
Interesting. I mean, I just haven't thought through the particular questions yet.
So you don't need to do it.
Yeah, I don't tend to have participation as such as a
well,
grade.
then you could set that to 0.
Just be 0 for now, and that's fine.
And then here's where, again, you could score the responses. Now, what Eric Mazur suggests, and it's pretty much the strategy I've been using too, is to give students points for participating, but give them more points if they get it correct. And because the goal in general is to find questions that are challenging, that require a bit of processing, where the answers are not obvious, where they do have to do some applications. And so that would be one answer. So in this case, what would happen is they get 1 point if they answered it correctly, but they would get 3 points. I'm sorry, they'd get 1 point if they answer it and 3 points if they answer it correctly. See, because the points for correct response is added. So in this case, they get twice as many. Actually, I'm a little more generous because I often ask questions where about half of the students will get it wrong. And so I usually give 3 points for responding, 5 for correct, but it doesn't matter.
I like it.
Do 1 and 1. But that way, because if a typical person gets half of them correct, half the time they get 3, half the time they get 5. So on average, they'd end up with a reasonable score. And then I also drop the 5 lowest scores in the grade book. But so, something like that could work. And that way, in this case, they get 2 points for any response. They get 3 if they answer it correctly. So, so that way they get points.
No points at all. I would just put zeros here and it would be fine.
So they would get zeros if they don't answer anything. And that would be for each question.
Oh. And if I'm just not, not attaching points to questions from class period, I can either exclude this from the grade book or just put zeros.
Yeah, so you could either delete the question at the end before you upload the grades, or you could just, well, there's a couple ways of doing it. One is you could make the response anonymous, and then it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't keep track of who answered it. And that's an option in the polling thing. You just click the option to make it anonymous, and then no points would be associated with it for anybody. But the problem would be if you are using some as correct and some as incorrect, if you just didn't mark a correct answer, then everyone would get the lower score and it would still be out of the total potential score. So normally what you would do is, if you don't want to count the question in the score, after you've done the class, you would just choose the option to delete that question and it doesn't become part of that day's score.
Perfect.
And you also can set a fixed number of total points per day, because, for example, some days I might have 5 questions, some days I might have 12 questions. And so each question would have a different weight depending on how many questions I happen to ask that day. You could also set a fixed number of scores and then it allocates it among those. So you could set 5 points per day or 10 points per day, and it would allocate the percentage of correct as a share of that total. Or you don't have to do it. That can also be set up in the Brightspace gradebook, depending on whether you use a weighted grade or just the average of the scores.
Okay.
So,
good food to think about there.
And now here is a question that depends in part on your class size and part on how you want to go about this. Some people, the default is to count up, and then you have to manually end the poll. And the problem with that is that some students will always be that last person to turn in a response, and it can go on for quite a while. But if you cut it off early, you're the bad guy. You're the one who cut off their chance of participating and getting the points. What I normally do is I usually use a countdown. Now, this semester where I was doing a lot of free responses, I used the count up and I had a small number of students. And I knew how many people were there, and I could see when all the responses came in, and they tended to respond quickly. But when I have a class of 200 to 400 students, I don't want to be trying to count how many students are there and so forth. So I do a countdown for multiple choice or free, or multiple choice. I tend to give them about 1.5 minutes. For multiple select, I tend to do that. For problems that involve computation, I will generally put the problem up on the screen, but not start the polling for a little bit. And I normally give them about 1.5 minutes. And what will happen is it will display. And if you see that people are not, there's still a lot of people not responding, there's an up arrow on the screen where you could bump it up and extend the time. But this way, at least they can see where they are in the countdown. It encourages them to think quickly, to respond quickly. And otherwise, either you end up cutting some of them off and they're unhappy about it, or, or it just takes a really long time. So you can always adjust it depending on the class and so forth. I would generally start at 1.5. Sometimes I'll bump it down to 1:15 or a minute if it's a class that responds quickly, then they all have their phones out and are ready. With a large class, I generally make it a little bit longer. And I think that's it for this page. Now, quizzing, the next tab, is actually if you're going to set up a multi-question quiz that students can respond to asynchronously. I never use that simply because if I'm going to put a quiz together, I'd rather do it in the learning management system. It's easier, but you do have that option of doing that. I usually just leave that and just never use that tool. Now, the next one is what I was hoping we would set up today, which is the integration, which right now is only available on Blackboard. And the problem is we will not be using Blackboard in the fall. But if you wanted to do it for a class, once it's set up with Brightspace, you would click on this, you would have to log into your Brightspace instance, and it would then, you'd select it and it would load everything in, and then you would have it.
Okay.
Now,
but now it's ready to go
now it's ready to go, but now you can actually try some of it. If you go back to that page, there was the option to download the desktop app. You might as well do that now.
Okay.
Windows or Mac, whichever.
Mac.
But now, if we had the integration set up, what would happen is it would connect to the course, it would load all your students in, it would automatically update as students add or drop, and then it would give you the option of syncing your grades with it.
Fantastic. Okay, so
yeah, you've already done most of it. So now you can just go to the download and double click on it and install it, or I think you drag it to applications. I don't remember.
And yep, so now it's opening and I just have to tell my computer that I think it's safe. And I need to move it here so you can see what's happening.
And now on all the Podium machines, you would click on the iClicker Cloud desktop icon and you would log in each time. If you're using your own computer, it would be right there. And there's your class. And now if you click on that, you could choose Start Class. And what will happen, there's not going to be any students in it, but what would happen now is you should have a little blue thing on top of your screen. Where did it go?
Oh, I do. It's on my other.
Oh, okay. Drag it back over to here. I had the same problem because I didn't realize I was connected to the projecting to the TV here.
Oh, I may have.
You may have started a quiz, but that's okay. You should be able to get back. Where'd that blue thing go?
This
click cancel.
Click cancel. There's the blue thing.
There it is. So what would happen is you'd move that anywhere on your screen where it's not going to be in the way. And when you were ready to do a poll, you would just click on the poll. You would then choose a type of question from the drop down, and multiple choices, just A through E. Short answer would be pre-response. Numeric would be accepting only number values. Target is an image where you would have an image on the screen on your slides, and there would be, in theory, a rectangle where the true range would be. So if you had a map and you were asking people to identify a certain region, they would click on that on their mobile devices or click on it with a mouse on the screen. And then when you get to score it, you would define a rectangle that matches the correct answers. So, you can't draw an irregularly defined area. So it's only useful if you can define the correct answer from an image as being a rectangle.
Part of a square or a rectangle.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I did, I do teach a class where we do map exercises on the continent of Africa. And as long as the square fits inside, or I can tell the students, you got to hit the center of the country with your finger. You got to hit the center of the country.
Right. And then you can define it wide enough to, to allow for error in that.
Okay. And then
because what happens is when you get the response, you draw a shaded rectangle over the correct responses. So, you could just put a fairly big square in the center of the country.
Yeah. If I have the right map, that's right.
And the multiple answer is just multiple select. And then they get proportions of the points for that based on how many of these correct responses they get. So you could have 2 or 3 correct answers and 2 or 3 incorrect, and they gain a fraction of the, if there's 3 correct answers, they get a third of it correct for each one of those 3, but they lose points if they incorrectly select, incorrect answers.
Okay. Okay.
And then
run that.
You would just click that, and what it will do is it will pop up asking you which screen you want to use it on if you have multiple screens. So, and if you are using multiple screens, it's ideal because then you could check to see the distribution of responses on the other screen. And I just drag it over there when I wanted to see how they answered. But when I'm in the classroom, because I only have the one screen, I use my mobile device. So yeah, you can pick your color screen and just click select. And what it's done now is it's just grabbed that image. And if it was a PowerPoint slide or Google Slides, your question would be there, and that would show up in the gradebook for students to view later and for you to see, what the question was. And then it would count down. You'd see the responses go up as people join the class. And that's not going to happen right now, but then the result, so you can click stop if you want. But it will count down and it will turn red as it gets to the end and bigger, just to remind students. And then if you click on results, it would give you a histogram of the responses, which in this case will be empty. But and if it was an image, it would show you what the original image was, and that's where you draw the rectangle. And if you had a histogram there and answer C was correct, you would just click on that bar, it would turn it green, and it would give the extra point for the people who answered it correctly.
Huh. So now the students who are, say, not present in class when I'm doing this, and they are therefore not participating in the poll, et cetera, can they later go to their grade book and see the poll, see the answer, have those materials, or do they have to generate it inside their own account?
I don't know. I assume they would, because I would assume they would see it. They would see that they had a 0 or a missing score then, but I believe they would still see it because it should be set for that column of data, for that data array, but I'm not positive on that.
Oh, interesting. Okay, but there's every possibility they could go into a class they had missed, open up the poll, see the images, see the questions, even see the answers, and they just didn't get any points.
They wouldn't get any points for it, right?
Okay. Okay, and this is where before I hit play, I would turn anonymous on or off.
Yes. And it turns black there just as a reminder. And then you could change. Oh, and another thing which is interesting, in terms of checking students' metacognition, you could turn the confidence on, where you could check to see how confident students are of their answers and look at the relationship between whether they're correct or not and the degree of confidence. Because there they would rate, every time they're asked a question, they would rate their confidence in the answer.
So before or after they answer? Must be
before, because that way it would be actually checked. They both choose an answer and then rate their confidence in the answer they selected. And
then it goes in to the system.
And then it gives them a little bit of feedback to help correct any metacognitive errors. Because if they're really confident and they get it wrong, the goal is that maybe they might not be so confident about things they don't understand as well. It could check for a Dunning-Kruger effect.
Sure. Okay. Well, that's fun.
So it's really easy to use, and you just log into it at the starter class. It pops up and you just do a poll whenever, it's appropriate.
Okay. I think I'll stop sharing now unless you want me to look at something else.
That's pretty much it.
Okay. Oh, I feel like I could stop sharing.
Yep.
If I can find the button.
Probably on the bottom.
There it is. There it is. There it is. I found it. There we go.
So any questions about clickers? We went through the actual use of it and some examples in the last session, but it's pretty straightforward. The only thing we can't do is uploading scores, and basically you get, when you log into it again, after you've had a class session, you'll see basically a matrix. You'll see each days. You can check the scores, check the results for students. You can go back in and delete questions if you don't want to include some, or if the questions turn out to be more ambiguous than you thought and students make a compelling case for different ones and you use single select, you can just delete those. And, normally I tell students at the time, well, okay, I can see that, you have a reasonable interpretation. We won't count this question, or something similar. And then delete it. And then you just simply choose upload. It asks you which days of scores to upload, and it will show you which ones happen and which one hasn't. And actually it chooses sync, and it will sync all the grades with the gradebook and come back. It syncs them sequentially as session 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so forth. And the only problem is if you do a practice run or something, it will show up as a session, and session 2 might actually be the first one that you're grading, for example. And the other thing is it will not assign them to in Blackboard, at least, it does not assign a gradebook category. So you have to select a gradebook, create a gradebook category. And after you do the uploads, you have to assign each of the grade items to the gradebook category. I assume it'll be the same in Brightspace. That's a change from the old iClicker, because the iClicker Classic used to actually create iClicker polling scores as a gradebook category and automatically assign any grades to that. Here we have to go back in and manually assign them after each class session for them to count it in their overall gradebook scores.
And there's no way to change the name of a class session, right? To substitute it with the date.
You can edit that fully in the gradebook, because in the gradebook, you get to define all the items.
Exactly.
And
okay.
it doesn't, let me qualify that. The short name will be the session, or the long name is a session number, but it will also include a short name as the date. So the date will always be there. And I did a couple of practice runs with mine before class. And so my first day of class that was graded was actually session 3. So whenever I updated it, I just went in immediately and changed it down to the appropriate number and assigned it to the category. So the gradebook scores would be accurate.
So let me see if I follow this. If I'm in class, I open a poll, I do this exercise with the students. It does not automatically go into the Blackboard, the D2L. I have to go into my account, my online account with iClicker, and tell it to send that data on.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. So that is an extra step after class.
It is, but it just takes a couple seconds.
Yep. Yep.
And well, actually, one more step is you have to go in and assign it to the gradebook category for the grade to be reflected in their overall grade.
And could you do that in batches, right? At the end of the week?
You could. So you could upload the whole week set of scores and go in and change them all at once.
Okay. And then iClicker Cloud is going to keep all this data for how long?
I don't know. I assume indefinitely.
Does it must live there?
It's living in the cloud, and students have access to it. The students can go in iClicker Cloud, they can see the scores for each day, and it will have the session number, which may not match the section number in the gradebook if you run some practice days or something goes wrong, and so forth. But otherwise, they'll see each day's scores. And in both cases, it will have the date of the session there. So they can go back and see how they did. They'll be able to see their answers, which ones they got correct, which were incorrect, and so forth.
Okay, but that data then, well, it's reproduced in Blackboard or D2L or
yes, when you sync it. So they will see the scores in their iClicker account and in the app immediately after the class. But they won't see, they'll only see it after you sync it with, with Brightspace.
Okay. Well, I'm excited. I think this could be great. And it's free for the students for how long? We don't know. For this year.
It's semester by semester, but we've got it certainly for the fall. I think we'll probably have it for next year. So
Huh.
So, and if people keep using it, I think we'll probably continue because the administration is supportive of it, as long as we don't have any major state budget issues.
Yeah. And now I don't go into iCloud to, like with Zoom, you have to sort of pre-populate polls and things, right? And including the
Everything
language,
is done,
the verbiage.
whatever, as long as it appears on the screen,
That's
it's
where it-
there. And
Okay,
that's
so-
what makes it so much easier, because you put it in whatever you normally use for presentation. One person used to not use any slides, but he just opened Notepad and type a question, and whatever is visible on the screen, it does a screen grab of it, and that becomes the question that appears, in iClicker Cloud.
That's amazing. And so then if the students want to see that image, they can't
They
do
can
that.
go right into their gradebook and click on their question, and they will see the image afterwards.
But in Blackboard and D2L or in iCloud?
Only in iClicker, because in iClicker, in Blackboard or DTL to D2L, they'll only see their grades for each day.
Okay, but if they want to see the image, the information, then they have to go to
iClicker Cloud.
iClicker Cloud. Okay,
But
okay.
if they're using an app, it's right in their app.
Perfect. All right. All right. John, this is very exciting. Thank you.
It's a lot of fun. I like it. Students like it. And nearly I've only heard of one faculty member who used it and then dropped it. And it was because a couple of our students complained. But, we've got at least 3 dozen faculty who've been using it for multiple years now. And, most of them say they never go back to not using it. So.
It seems really fun.
Good. Okay. Well, thank you. Any other questions?
I'm all set for now.
Good. Okay.